Thank you. We'll go ahead and get the afternoon started here on our last day of the Select Committee on Tribal Relations. After a nice picnic lunch, thank you to Senator Barlow and Lily Sharp. Now that we're sustained, we're ready for we have one topic left, but before we do that, we're gonna go back and have a little more discussion about solid waste management, because we've had Sean Brown be able to join us, and he wants to give some updates and talk to us a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and do that before we get into our rock art imagery. So if you want to go ahead and come up, Mr. Brown. Thank you for being here. And if you would introduce yourself and then just go ahead.
Hello, Chairwoman Oakley. I want to thank you for your time and the opportunity to be able to give you guys an update on our progress at the E3 transfer station. And currently we have a contract with Hopper Disposal based out of Shoshone, Wyoming. And we had to sell one of our assets, our older compactors that we have, what was valued at $60,000. But then spoke with Mike Demick, the owner of Hopper, and we worked out an agreement to where we can, provide services for the asset there. So we went into the service agreement that we have here, signed with him for $60,000. And then I got an estimate from him prior to that was the cleanup was going to be roughly $40,000 to $80,000 for the cleanup process. And we came up with 60, and we're working on, coming up with the additional 20, but we're also giving them a hand also. We have a worker out there using our loader, pushing and getting them in piles. And we started hauling on Monday. And right now he doesn't have any trucks running because COVID went through his organization there, and 5 drivers out. So yesterday, the Shoshone tribe, they pitched in a hand for one day. They said they only had in their budget to be able to help us, and they did haul 4 loads for us. And also today, we're only one truck running today, just because, the lack of personnel. And also, I'd like to, I think they mentioned earlier that we're in the process of trying to get a contract with Fremont County Solid Waste. And the holdup there is just from the cleanup of E3 transfer station. So they informed me last week, and then that's when we started this process. I reached out to Mike, and then we made this agreement, and then we actually he started moving equipment the Friday before, and we start pushing on Monday. And currently our loader is down, has a bad tire. Yeah, we ran over a big chunk of metal, and so we can't help with that process right now. So, and totally, we want 1/3 of the contract that's currently from between the joint tribes, and that's roughly 285,000. And so we're getting 95,000, which will cover about, I'd say, our tipping fees. So then we had a meeting with the joint, also with Keenan Grossbeck, and we did negotiate half of the allegations from Circle Ridge, which is roughly 240,000 a year. So right now we're sitting where we can actually maintain the E3 transfer station with those funds. And the reason why we went for 1/3 is because you're all aware that the landfill is going to be closing. So that gives them additional funds to, make up for the long haul to sand draw. So they're looking at maybe a 40 or 50 mile, one-way trip. So that's why we opted to, instead of asking for half, we asked for 1/3 of it. And currently we're in negotiations to secure some funds for the 17 mile. Our goal there is to get that up and running at the beginning of the year. We got promises and we got agreements, but we have nothing in writing yet as far as the funding to be fully funded. So look forward to that. And we're trying to get the E3 transfer station open by October 31st. I met with the contractor last Thursday as far to assess the fencing, and there's only like 1/3 of it that is salvageable. So we're looking at 25,000 there to replace the fencing and with a new gate. And we also we purchased 8 new 40-yarders, roughly 72,000. We purchased a shed, which is roughly 4,500. And also, there's no electricity there, so we opted to do a generator, propane powered generator there for lighting and heating. So, and with the 120,000 we're getting from the oil field, we can create a job there, which is a full-time position with benefits to monitor, who comes, who go, and also to separate the solid waste and tires, white goods, all of that as they come in. And right now we're looking at maybe a small fee of maybe $2 or $5, for the tipping fees. So this long process. We started this process at the beginning of the year when Keenan Grossbeck, he reached out to me and told me his plans, because we looked at their budgets and they're looking at 525,000 that they get for joints. But our community, we got nothing out of the whole situation there, because they're currently managing the Fort Washakie transfer station, which personally I would have went centralized, so you got both communities from Arapahoe and also Fort Washakie where they can both come and utilize the transfer station there. But that's I'm not in that position, so that's what sparked this conversation, and where we were planning the plans to take over the Ethity transfer station, so we can actually provide a service to the Northern Arapahoe tribe, even though the Fremont County is funding, joints, but we haven't got anything out of the deal so far. The past couple years, since they finished, haven't serviced Ethity for a couple years now. So, and I wished I had time to prepare. I could have put a slideshow of the before and after photos of the Ethity transfer station, but like I said, I didn't have much time, so I apologize for that. And also, another thing we did get out of the meeting with the joints is they agreed to match our funding as far as the cleanup process of Ethity, which I'm hoping to receive, or hopefully we get it, or, and also, but all in the Arapahoe tribe to get this project going, we're looking at 67,166. That's how much we came up with to try to get the transfer station operational, and for the future there. And we're looking at a similar budget and a startup cost for 17 Mile also, but there's not a major cleanup there, so we'll save some funding there because that's been closed since June 30th, 2016. And that was one thing that I can, being a resident growing up here, the illegal dumping wasn't like it is now until after these transfer stations were closed. And then that's when all of the major dump sites started, because I remember growing up, you can drive around in the hills, you never seen that until 2016 was in the Arapahoe area. And then after 2018 or 2020, when Ethity was, then they just continued dumping there around the area there. And then they started, like, I think they stated before, they kept starting the waste on fire to reduce it. And, that's a whole nother emissions and also the hazards there that I think they've mentioned before, so I don't want to touch on that, but that's our, our update where we're at now. And, but we look forward to, providing this service for our community. And we do currently have residential, and we got contracts with the BIA, our schools, and our housing, to try to reduce some of this illegal dumping. But it's an uphill battle. But and we're looking into funding community change grant, which will help with the major dump sites. And we reached out to other, trying to assess, what would the cleanup process, how the amount, the price tag on that. But we got budgets, as for that process there. But that was about all I have today as far as our update for the process here.
Well, thank you, Mr. Brown. Pretty impressive. You have those numbers down just off the top of your head. And I just, since you weren't here earlier, I just wanted to say, I mean, people are saying great things about the work you're doing, recognizing that. So thank you, and thank you for coming here. And you know, you were talking about photos, and I think it was Councilwoman Returns to War mentioned it too, which, I mean, would have been good to have seen, but just also that I have heard like the incredible progress, and that people have seen it and noticed it and maybe making some headway. So I think you guys are doing great things and headed in the right direction, and I'm glad it's just something that we're continuing to focus on and tackle, because it's just something that the tribal communities need for sure. What did you say about, you said that you can contract with the Fremont County Solid Waste after you have to be done?
Yeah, the cleanup process. And actually, we've scheduled a meeting with them next week sometime when all the members will be here. So, and then we're gonna show them our service agreement and before and after pictures, and hopefully we'll have that signed by next week.
Oh, great. Well, thank you, Mr. Brown. And questions, comments from the committee? Yeah, that really was great. Thank you for taking the time. I know you, again, weren't communicated with, and you made the time and found it to come here and give us that update, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And your work.
Yeah, appreciate the
Thank you.
opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't think unless anybody wanted to, but I don't think there's any need for any more comment on that. So we will go into our last topic, something we've spent some time with on this interim, the indigenous rock art imagery, and we've worked with the state, and we've gone to a couple different sites, and we've worked on drafting some legislation that I mean, maybe will be helpful. That's what we're trying to do, right? See if we can help solve a problem. So with that, I will turn it over to Lily Sharp and to go over a bill draft and give us any other information that we need to move forward. So Lily.
Thank you, Chairwoman Oakley. The bill draft that you're looking at now should be 25 LSO 235. This is a new bill draft that you haven't looked at. It's a simplification of the very simplification of the last bill that we had. And all it basically does is it just creates a misdemeanor. And this is again within the state lands statutes. So it's only dealing with state lands, but it creates a misdemeanor for injury to petroglyphs or pictographs. And so on page 1, line 12, 16, that statute number 36-1-116, that is the last of 3 statutes that deal with destruction to archaeological sites or paleontological sites on state lands. And it adds this on page 2, line 1, it just adds this last subsection C, or I'm sorry, subsection E, that just provides that anyone who breaks off, cracks, carves, or in any way defaces or harms a petroglyph or a pictograph, and this is again without the consent of the Board of Land Commissioners, in the event that the Land Commissioners has already given them some sort of a permit, is guilty of a misdemeanor. And the misdemeanor penalty is similar to most of the misdemeanors in Wyoming statutes, and that would be a $750 fine or not more than 6 months in jail. And then the section 3 on page 2, line 10, again has funding for to survey petroglyphs and pictographs on state lands. And I believe our state archaeologist has a couple suggestions for amendments to, possible amendments to Section 3, and that's basically the whole bill.
All right, great. Thank you. Thank you, Lily. Is there any, Representative Chestick?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Lily, just, I think I know the answer, but very quickly on page 2, line 3, I assume that petroglyphs and pictographs are defined elsewhere in the statute?
They are not defined elsewhere that I know of.
Madam Chair,
Go
or
ahead.
Madam
ahead,
Chair,
go
to
ahead,
add some
ma'am.
color to that, a lot of the language was borrowed from model statutes in other states. And so I know Lily and I looked at quite a few states, how they've got their statutes structured. And I think that pictographs and petroglyphs are terms of art in the industry. So I'm not so worried about defining them. I think it'll be okay.
Right, we did have, had some of those discussions and I think when Lily was working on this, was looking at and using what we believed were the correct terms. Not that we wouldn't be open to it, but we did try to get that right.
And actually, I didn't bring my statute in, so maybe I would have, I'll have to look at the statute. It does mention, it mentions, and Spencer, you might help me, if the statutes above mention, it might mention petroglyphs and pictographs, but it doesn't define it. But I'll have to, I'm sorry, I left my statute book in the car, but I can look really fast online.
I could look online too. Do you, I mean, any idea if it's defined? Okay. And maybe we'll, and without getting ahead of ourselves, I know you've discussed the proper terms with us before, and when you come up, we can just hear from you on that. Okay. So if nothing further from Ms. Sharp, so we're going to public comment. We've got both of the TIPO offices listed, State Lands and Investment, State Archaeologist, and SHPO. Is generally who we've got listed, and of course, any other regular public comment. But so, and I don't really care about order. Is there anybody from the TIPO offices that wants to give testimony or comment? I don't believe so. Is that okay? Let's go ahead and do state archaeologists. Yeah, however you guys want to do it. If you guys want to come up together. That sounds good.
And Chair, before
ahead.
they start, I'll just let you know what there's 3 statutes. There's 36-1, 114, 115, and 116 that deal with archaeological and paleontological ruins. Again, as you recall, and Mr. Pelton will tell you that the language is archaic that's used right now. But in 36-1-114, what the first line says that before any excavation on any prehistoric ruins, pictographs, hieroglyphics, or any other ancient markings or writing or archaeological or paleontological deposits. And then it makes it requires a permit from the State Board of Land Commissioners.
Okay,
Throw a question out before we start.
go ahead, Senator Case.
Why couldn't we fix 36-1-114 as we're doing this bill and just at least get rid of the word hieroglyphics? Or
And I appreciate that comment, because that's exactly where my brain kind of went. I'm like,
I'm going with your brain.
well, no, I don't have the answer, but we can certainly have that during this discussion is to see if we maybe can come up with the most updated terminology, certainly if we're got our fingers in these statutes. So I think that's a good idea. And of course, we've got the right people in front of us maybe to have that discussion. So anything further before we get started? Go ahead. Okay. if you gentlemen would go ahead and introduce yourself and say who you're with and proceed with testimony.
I'm Spencer Pelton, the state archaeologist with the Office of the Wyoming State Archaeologist. I'll have a really brief testimony. I think this is great, short and sweet. It really achieves the objectives that I think that this committee set out to achieve. I had a few minor comments about especially section 3. I think it's important to specify that this appropriation would only deal with known pictographs and petroglyphs. So this is not a proactive search for additional rock image sites. This is just the a little over 100 ones we know about. So I think line 14 on page 2, all pictographs and petroglyphs on state, school, and institutional lands. Probably should just say all known, all currently known, or something like that. Just so, we're not having to walk every inch of every state section in the state.
Without 200.
I do think the timeline is a little short. This basically gives us a year to do all these assessments of these sites. This is pretty time-consuming work, and especially when Wyoming's field season is relatively short in general. I think 1 year is pretty optimistic to get this job done.
If you were to choose, what would you put there, Dr. Pelton?
I would say at least 2. I think two's realistic. You know, it'd probably end up being about 60 sites a field season, which is a lot.
Okay, Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd also say that when we get to this point, we can change the effective date to immediately, and that gives them a greater, longer season in the first year. So they know where they are, they can go.
Okay.
Um,
Go ahead, Dr. Pelton.
And I returned to the budget that I came up with for this after comments from our last hearing, specifically pertaining to the 3-dimensional modeling that Senator Case brought up. I also got some comments from just the archaeological community that brought to my attention some sites they knew about, but were not in our records. It's just kind of word of mouth. And that added a few sites to the list. So I do have revised budget estimates, one for just the slightly higher estimates of the number of sites we would record, and another that incorporates the 3-dimensional modeling into that. I'm happy to share those numbers
Please do.
with you. So the baseline revised budget ended up being $271,800. And then adding on top of that 3-dimensional modeling to each one of those sites would be $441,340. And that accounts for the added field time it takes to take a ton of photos of these sites, plus the lab time it takes to actually build these 3-dimensional models, plus a little bit of money for the software and that kind of thing that we need to store data and process this stuff.
So with those updates, would you anticipate that being written out in this section as far as the 3D modeling? Like,
Madam Chair, I guess I'll leave that up to you all as to what you want to put in the appropriation. I kind of gave you 2 options. One is kind of the baseline, just recording the sites, and the other one's this kind of added 3-dimensional model thing, which would make it more publicly accessible via websites that can host these things so people can look at these sites. And I think I'll leave it up to you all which of those that you'd feel appropriate would be funding.
okay, thank you. Go ahead, Senator Case.
Well, would it be appropriate to discuss that issue right now?
You know,
It's kind of if we,
I think so.
Okay.
I was just thinking that too, because if not, then when we're working the bill, we have to try to bring Dr. Pelton up. Let's go ahead and
Yeah.
figure out the concept now.
so the way I look at this is if, it's like, are we going to add on the 3D modeling or not? Or it seems a shame to me to have all this field work happen and all these people go out in the field and do all this. And then say down the road, we're going to come back and get 3D modeling. We might as well get it now. It seems like a lot of money, but it's not really a lot of money, big scheme of things.
And I think, maybe exactly what you're saying, but to do all this work, but then not have it something that a product can be seen by the community or the state, it seems like stopping a step short.
Agree.
So I would agree with that. Did you have a comment, Senator Barlow?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just want to be clear that the 271 is revised of the basic work. The $400,000 number, 441, that is combination of both the field work and the 3D modeling. Is that accurate? I want to know if two different numbers or they have to be added together. Thank you.
Dr. Pelton?
Madam Chair, Senator Barlow, the $441,340, that's the
All of it.
complete sum.
Okay.
The
And-
whole banana.
And if you would, you probably have said it, but if we were to add language to include it, if we were to go that route and do the 441,000, you've said the 3D modeling and, computer IT. Can you give us the language that you're thinking for that?
Madam Chair, let's see, let me just go through the text real quick. I would say maybe on line 13, for the purposes of surveying, documenting, and three-dimensionally modeling internally or through a consultant, all pictographs, petroglyphs. So just add that one task to the appropriation.
Let's note that.
We've got that noted. Do you think there's any that we need to add? Or maybe we don't. But specifically talking about, computer programs, IT, anything that you would think needed specified in here or not?
Madam Chair, I don't think so. I think that might be a little in the weeds for.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Questions for Dr. Pelton? Further discussion? Everybody's like really looking, thinking.
Madam
Go
Chair,
ahead, Madam Co-Chair.
just a little discussion on it. I think Lily and I had talked about the hieroglyphic issue and that that's an antiquated term or an inaccurate term. But as we were thinking about it, or as I was thinking about it and providing some feedback on this bill draft, we're trying to get after one bite of the apple. And I think that the statute needs a little bit more work. And I think that at least my hope would be that a future committee, if not this one, then perhaps TRW would look at the issue, talk to the agencies, talk to state lands, really figure out that process. And then that word hieroglyphic could be removed at that time. So that's why I just wanted to kind of provide that color. And I think, I can't remember if you and I visited about that, Spencer, but that was my recollection of why we just took a small bite, so to speak, with this bill.
And what are your thoughts on that? Go ahead, Dr. Pelton.
Madam Chair, Senator Ellis, I think the rationale was really, if you're going to revise the language of the original statute, it kind of opens a can of worms. And I think that's what we kind of ran into last time, was that when you start changing definitions and removing definitions and that kind of thing, it just kind of snowballed into something that was a little intractable. So I'll defer to Senator Ellis on and Lily on the rationale, but I think just adding this paragraph that specifically protects rock art was just kind of deemed the cleanest way to get this objective
Okay.
achieved.
Thoughts on that? Go ahead.
And just to follow up, I just wanted to acknowledge that we did talk about it and gave it some thought, and this was some of the guidance for our consideration today.
We're kind of, okay, I don't think there's any further questions coming. Go ahead.
I have just one more comment about the wording. There is the issue of historic inscriptions, which in a technical sense is probably subsumed by the term petroglyphs. But a lot of these sites are historic inscription sites from the Immigrant Trail era. Some of them are combined historic inscription sites with indigenous petroglyphs and pictographs as well. I suppose I would recommend that whenever petroglyphs or pictographs are mentioned in this statute, that historic inscriptions are included in that as well. And that is a well-known definition. I actually, Brian, if you want to maybe speak to like the difference of between historic inscriptions and like graffiti, basically.
Okay, so with that, that's, I think, maybe a good time. We'll move on. And then, so if you go ahead, introduce yourself and give testimony, and we'll continue with this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Brian Beatles. I'm the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer. And yeah, I think there's kind of two things. I just wanted to kind of, follow up with what Spencer was talking about. One of my concerns was, again, that timeline. The way a lot of these projects work when there's survey is, Spencer's office will probably be heading up the survey process, whether internally or through a consultant. Then the information comes into my office for the actual data entry. So my concern on the timeline for like a year was making sure that my staff had enough time to actually take all the data that's being collected and get it into a database so it's actually usable and then becomes available. So that was my first concern, was just that timeline, so that once the field work is over, that we have time either through probably interns is how we do a lot of that, is to have our interns be able to jump on that data and have time to enter that in.
So Deputy Director, would you prefer like 3 years? I mean, if we're gonna, what would you ideally want?
I would say a minimum of 2. So I would agree with like a minimum of 2. I would take 3 if I could take it.
Go ahead.
And then when it comes to, historic inscriptions versus graffiti, when we are look at this, the historic inscriptions are really tied to really important, periods in the history of this country. It speaks to that westward expansion. It speaks to that homesteading era of our country. And that's a lot different than, somebody out on a weekend camping trip, scrawling their name out 10 years ago. I not to minimize where we're at in history right now, but when we're looking at those themes of those settlers that are coming across for various purposes of seeking land, seeking gold, whatever they were seeking on their way west. To me, it's a very different kind of story and speaks to the importance of those sites.
And so, and when we say historic inscriptions, I think what I'm hearing then is that that's a term of art, so kind of a thing. So using it in and of itself gives the professionals the direction that they need.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
It's a fairly, well understood term. And there's a lot of them, of these kinds of sites around Wyoming. But yeah, it's a fairly well used term amongst professionals in the state.
Senator Case?
Well, on the same point, it doesn't just mean old, and so you can have a historic signature because it's old, or it's going to become old in the future. But that is not your interpretation and the way that you use it professionally, because it's more tied to these significant historical cultural events. Okay. I can live with that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, Senator Case, in the field, when we look at definitions of historic sites or historic properties, sort of the rule of thumb that is followed is we look at a 50-year cutoff. So in looking at definitions of historic, the general rule of thumb is, it's 50 years or older. And I'm there with you. I became historic earlier this year. And some of that is to kind of differentiate because with more recent history, there's certain things, certain themes that I think we can make judgments on that are important to the history of our country. We can look at the Cold War, which may not be 50 years old, but we can make those determinations that those events really shaped our country and our world. There may be some other themes that are less than 50 years old that we may not have enough, haven't had enough time to look back on to see how they really have shaped our country. And so that's why that 50-year kind of cutoff has been a rule of thumb that's been in place in our field.
Go ahead.
But the 50 years is not neither a necessary or sufficient condition for it to be historic. It's so I just want to be clear on that. There's no magic to 50 years other than it's kind of a filing system, but it's not what determines whether it's historic.
Deputy Director.
Madam Chair, Senator Case, that's correct. It's basically like a rule of thumb, a place to kind of start, when we start to look at sites to, begin to make some judgments, but it's not a be all end all.
Okay, and any further thoughts for us on this, or comments or testimony?
Not for me, but I'd be happy to take any questions anybody might have.
Looks like Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So in regard to the historic inscriptions language, would it be either or both of yours suggestion that we just insert historic inscriptions, petroglyphs, comma, pictographs, or historic inscriptions? So it's very explicit in the legislation and in the budget, section 2 and section 3. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Should we put it? You're good.
Dr. Plum.
Madam Chair, Senator Barlow, I would recommend wherever petroglyphs or pictographs is mentioned in this statute to just add historic inscriptions at the end of it or wherever.
Okay, clear.
I
Senator
think
Case,
putting it at the end has a notion of cultural respect with indigenous people. You know, it's a fine point, but we put it at the end of the list.
point taken. Okay, any further comments or questions? Go ahead, Representative Penn.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So is the funding $271,000, is that based on 116 image sites, or is that, so it says 36 of those are historic inscriptions, and so 80 are indigenous rock image sites. The funding, is that based on 80 or is that based on 116?
Dr. Plum.
Madam Chair, Representative Penn, the 271, that's kind of the baseline funding, that actually accounts for 120 based on 120 total based on comments I received from the archaeological community. So it includes both historic inscriptions and indigenous petroglyphs and pictographs.
Okay. Anything further for these two gentlemen? Well, thank you. We appreciate it. As we're working the bill, we might holler out at you if you are sticking around. So thank you. And thank you for not only today's meeting, but this interim taking us out and showing us around and sharing your knowledge. We really appreciated your time and your effort. So thank you, guys.
Thank you all.
Okay, so is there anybody else? So like state lands and investments is mentioned?
Madam Chair, Jason Crowder from the Office of State Lands and Investments is online.
Perfect. Would you call, it's director now, correct? Is that?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Interim director right now.
Okay, interim director Crowder, thank you for being here. Introduce yourself and proceed with testimony. We'd appreciate it.
Thank you. Again, Jason Crowder, interim director for the Office of State Lands and Investments. I appreciated the conversation so far today and in the previous meeting, and also thank you again for letting me appear virtually. This is a much easier to understand bill now compared to what it was back at the last meeting. The only thing that I think I would highlight for the committee is, I guess, two things. One, Ms. Sharp had already mentioned that these are misdemeanors only applied to violations on state lands and nowhere else for this change. But also, we are adding another misdemeanor to a list of a couple other misdemeanors within existing statute. And I'd point to the existing statute of 36-1-116A. And inside of that, it says that anybody who violates any of the provisions of this act is guilty of a misdemeanor, subject to a fine of not less than $25 and not more than $100 or 6 months in jail. What the addition of the amendment does in the draft bill is it says essentially the same thing. If you do any of the list of things that are in the draft bill, you are subject or you're guilty of a misdemeanor. Some of those things are exactly the same, and specifically removal of the artifact or removal of whatever you're looking at. So we may have a little bit of conflict or confusion when we address somebody who may be removing one of those things without approval by the board, how much we are to assess them, which part of this statute should be the applicable misdemeanor we should point to. So I just highlight that for the committee. I don't know that I have a great solution yet, but I'm happy to work with LSO to see if we can't figure that out, because I think figuring it out isn't just making sure that the words and the amounts fined are consistent throughout this section of statute, but also how other pieces of statute may point back to this one. Should it be an A? Should it be an E? Those types of construct issues, but happy to work with LSO on that.
Okay, thank you for that, interim director. Do you have any other, general testimony or comment for us at this time?
Madam Chair, I don't. I appreciate the committee's efforts, so happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any questions for the interim director? Stick around if you would. I guess one of the things I'd like to ask while we're right here is, and I know it's kind of off the cuff, but is any sort of legal analysis there from Ms. Sharp?
Chairwoman Oakley, it is a little bit different, and we recognize that this isn't the perfect statutory writing, but again, we didn't want to open a can of worms. What we wanted to be, I think that was the committee's intent, to be sure to protect, especially like the pictographs and petrographs that we've seen this interim. And so what the current statutes, what they do is they do create a misdemeanor, but it really is for excavating without permission of the Board of Land Commissioners, or for removing. And that, and I think technically, I think that it would be up to the prosecutor to decide which subsection you wanted to prosecute under. And if it were just somebody going up and shooting at a petroglyph or a pictograph, it might be easier to use this new subsection.
So in looking at it, you felt like there is a different type and form. And again, there's some discretion there on which one would be charged, but feeling like subsection A is a removal. And then where we really kind of hit in subsection E, that vandalism, sort of
Exactly.
a type of an event.
And Madam Chairwoman,
Go ahead, Senator Case.
I mean, kind of the discrepancy comes about because the word removes is in the new E and removal is in the previous one. I mean, we could solve that by not having removes, but I'm not seeing the issue, I think, as being really of consequence. And I sort of do agree that, in you being a prosecutor, you could see that you could bring the charges under either one of these sections. And so I think it's good. We're good to go.
Okay, thank you, Senator Case. And I would agree that the discretionary portion of it, as far as a prosecutor saying, okay, this was a small deal or something maybe, and of some small removal, and chose to do subsection A. But I don't know that we want to take it out of subsection E in case it was a bigger issue that we wanted to have that full misdemeanor consequence for. Okay, good. Well, that's good discussion. And so any further questions or comments for Interim Director Crowder? Thank you again for your participation and for being here. And with that, you can stick around if you'd like. Is there anybody else in the room, and I don't think there's anybody else online that wants to make public comment or comment on this issue or this bill draft? Madam Co-Chair.
To relate to the committee, I can't remember if I sent the email, but I did hear from the gentleman who testified at our last hearing representing the mining association, and he didn't express any concerns with this bill draft.
All right. Well, going once, twice. All right, we're gonna close public comment.
Move to pass.
Wow, we are, Senator Case is moving along. So is there any discussion on the bill? Do we need to move it first? We can discuss. Go ahead, Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So my first amendment will be, and I guess I'll leave it up to staff to put it in the title if they want to, but to add historic inscriptions in all the appropriate places as the last of the three options: petroglyph, pictograph, and or depending on where it's being used throughout the bill, historic inscriptions. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Could we go ahead and put it in the title if we're gonna do that?
So that's included in the motion to, and, okay, so do I have a second?
Second. Question?
Any further discussion on that amendment for clarification? No. Okay. Question having been called, all those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That amendment has passed. Further discussion or amendments?
Madam Chairman,
Senator Barlow.
I know there's multiple amendments in this section 3, but I'm just going to take them one at a time so
Okay.
we can discuss. On line 14, between all, on page 2, line 14, between all and pictographs, insert known.
Second.
That has been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Question having been called, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. That has passed. That amendment has passed.
Madam Chairman.
Further, go ahead, Senator Barlow.
Next one would be on line 17 and line 21 to strike 26 and insert 28. Add 2 years to the timeline.
Second.
That amendment having been moved and seconded, any discussion? Question having been called, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. That amendment has passed. Further amendments?
Madam Chairman, if I could just follow up.
Senator Barlow?
That 28, the language in that following last sentence then becomes a little funky because of the standard budget issue, but we might want to give Lily a little bit of latitude.
Let's make it so that these funds don't revert.
Yeah. Anyway, that might be a,
Okay, so if we're gonna do that, I think there needs to be another amendment. Would you all agree to strike some language?
It probably would be conceptual but let me throw it out.
Okay,
The motion would be that any expended unobligated funds remaining from this appropriation shall not revert until June 30th, 2028.
yeah, it's,
okay. Do I have a second? Or-
Second.
Okay, it's been,
okay, we're just, Madam Chairman, so if I could
Go ahead.
clarify in second, all we're doing is inserting a not then on page 2, line 20 after shall.
Well,
Not in
it's
it,
a little
yeah.
bit more convoluted. We have a little leeway here.
yes,
As provided by law, we really don't want them to revert till they finish the project, and the project is 2028. I think if we say any unexpended, unobligated funds remaining from this appropriation shall not revert prior to June 30th, 2028. And because it's confusing when it says provided by law, this is the law. And if we just take out the words provided by law, only because I think it's confusing, and put not revert and then put in until.
until that date?
Yeah. It's a 2-year project. So if they haven't finished it in 2 years, the money would go back. And I'd certainly give staff leeway to fudge with appropriations on this.
Do you, I mean, you seem like you're with us, Ms. Sharp.
Yes, Chairman, Chairman Oakley, I understand what you're saying, and I'll also double check with the budget division how to say it.
Okay, so we have the amendment. Any further discussion? Question having been called. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That amendment has passed. And Senator Case.
I would go with the higher appropriation and add the 3D modeling.
Second.
That has been moved and seconded. I want to make sure that Ms. Sharp, and do we want that it was 441,000 something?
$340. On the
22
back
cents.
sheet.
441,300, I can't see,
$40.
$340. And then adding, and
Of surveying, comma, documenting, and 3D modeling.
3D or three-dimensionally modeling. Does that, do you have that?
Yeah.
Ms. Sharp? Okay, discussion on the amendment. Representative Penn.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This gives me a little bit of heartburn, not because it wouldn't be wonderful to have everything checked off the list. I think the intent, in my opinion, of this bill is to make sure that we're getting started on looking at protecting these things. And so that amendment takes this bill from what's in the bill as written from $260,000 up to $700,000. And in
That's the
attempt-
total,
the total is 400. Okay, I
441
thought
or
that
whatever.
the two were added together.
Yeah.
What's a little better? I think that if we can get it done for cheaper, and I understand it's, would be a wish list to have 3D done. I would prefer to keep it at the less amount, just trying to be a better steward of tax dollars in a situation, in a current economy where this comes out of somebody's pocket and people are struggling right now. So I would be opposed to that.
And just for discussion, I think, I'm glad it was brought forward and I appreciate the thoroughness of Dr. Pelton. And I think for $170,000 for us not to take that final step, which brings the information to the people would be, I just would be ill-advised that we don't kind of finish the project while we're doing it. So I'll be in favor. Any further discussion? Madam Co-Chair.
Madam Chair, along those lines, I mean, I do think it's a pretty significant one-time investment, and the sooner or the more we delay in doing it, the more we could lose these treasures. And so we owe it to future generations too, to capture knowledge and share what we know about our amazing Wyoming and the people and who came before us. And so I understand the financial concern, but there's impacts if we don't act as well and we lose these resources and knowing about them.
Further discussion? Question having been called. All those in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. That amendment has passed. Further amendments.
Madam Chair?
Madam Co-Chair.
Madam Co-Chair, I'd like to amend the effective date, but I think we need two. I think section 1 should take effect on July 1st, 2025. And then section 2 could be made effective immediately. That would give the team time to start working. And the reason that I think it's important to maintain the July 1st, 2025 for the penalty is, the purpose of putting out effective dates is so that people are aware that certain activities are prohibited. You don't want someone in the public not knowing that it's against the law to shoot a petroglyph or shoot at it. And then all of a sudden, without having notice, being slapped with a misdemeanor. So as unfortunate as that is, I think that's generally how we treat criminal statutes. And so I would hope that we would maintain two separate effective dates for that reason.
I understand what you're saying. So, so yours would be in two parts. Will you just tell us how the
Yeah.
amendment would look?
So Madam Chair, section 4 would say section 1, and this is where Lily would need to make sure it conforms. Section 1 is effective July 1st, 2025. Section 2 is effective immediately, or excuse me, Section 3. Do you have those? Section 1? I think you know it. Are we missing a Section 2 in the bill? That's a typo. We'll fix that. Section 1 effective immediately, Section 2, or effective July 1st, Section 2 effective immediately.
Discussion on the amendment. Go ahead, Senator Case.
I'm not sure why, but usually one is amendments and one is a new language. So I'm not sure how we messed up our sections a little bit, but it's okay. We're good.
Oh, Madam, is it that it's codified, it's non-codified versus codified?
That's correct. So the first one was an amendment to but it's an amendment to an old section.
It's not creating new stuff.
Correct.
So, yeah,
And then section 2 is non-codified.
yeah.
But I will use the proper
I-
immediate effectiveness and effectiveness.
As far as the
As far as,
appropriation.
yeah, the appropriation. Other way around. The appropriation will be effective immediately and the section 1 will be
July 1,
July 1st of
2025.
2025.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so I think we all understand. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Question having been called, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. That amendment has passed. Further amendments on this little bill?
Question on the bill.
Question on the bill. And with that, it is a roll call, so please call the roll.
This is a roll call vote for 25 LSO 0235, petroglyph and pictograph protection. Senator Barlow, Senator Case, Representative Chestick,
Aye.
Representative Penn,
Aye.
Co-Chairwoman Ellis, Chairwoman Oakley.
Aye.
6 ayes, Madam Chair.
Thank you to everyone. So 25 LSO 235 will move forward. Go ahead, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, I think it might be appropriate to wait until after the November election, and as you and I are leaving, to give some thought of whether or not these are assigned to the House or the Senate. So just if committee members want to visit with us offline about that. I don't think we have a ton of legislation we're moving forward for 2025, but Senator Case might have a thought.
I would just make the motion that we allow the committee chairs, even though you're both leaving, that you decide where the bills go
Before.
at the appropriate time.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. And we're talking about community directives, but that means we don't have to do anything on that today.
No, you can wait till it's too, till they're breathing down your neck.
Okay.
Try to get a low number.
Which will be,
Right.
which will be soon.
All right, sounds good. Is there?
Absent objection, sounds great.
And that brings us to the end of our agenda for the day.
Public comment?
Yeah, is there, and I see somebody, go ahead, Mr. LeBeau. Good afternoon. If you would introduce yourself and then proceed with the comments that you would like to tell us.
Well, thank you for letting me speak.
Hold on, yep, there you go.
Hello, thank you for letting me speak. My name is Wade LeBeau. I'm a Shoshone tribal member. As many know, I have researched tree rights, things like that of that nature. I've just come before you today to give you some information that will help you in your endeavors in dealing with the Shoshone tribe here and others that are also here. What this is this is 4 sets of FOIA's, Freedom of Information Act requesting the status of from the Office of Federal Recognition as to the Arapaho with an O, Arapaho with an OE, Northern Arapaho with an O, Northern Arapaho with an OE in Wyoming. And all of these came back as no records from the Office of Federal Recognition. This leads me to believe in my research, as I cannot find a date when they were federally recognized, that they do not exist, that they are a corporation. So I've come here to present to you my FOIAs so you can have your legal team look at, or whoever you need to look at it, in order for you to make the right decisions for the state of Wyoming in dealing with the reservation. Because I believe this information needs to be out there. And I'm a Wyoming citizen. I'm also a Shoshone tribal member. And I'm here to set history and the record straight as to the status of our tribe, of the Shoshone tribe, and our reservation, and where we stand. As a Shoshone tribal member, the Shoshone tribe is one of 13 tribes that kept the original traditional treaty governments. All other 560 odd tribes are IRA tribes, or Indian Reorganization Act tribes, that have a body who can make up laws and make decisions for their tribe. The Shoshone tribe is not one of those. In a government-to-government relationship, the United States government, the United States federal government, has to deal with the Shoshone General Council, which is our traditional treaty government. The Shoshone General Council is the top tier of the Shoshone tribe, not the Shoshone Business Council or Shoshone Business Committee, as they were once called. So any laws, any taxes, any things of that nature have to be passed by the Shoshone General Council per federal law. So it's important for people to make note of this when dealing with these items. So as I like to prove myself right all the time, I will present you guys with these FOIAs for you to look at. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. LeBeau. Do you have copies? And go ahead and hand those to LSO if you would, Wade, and they'll hand them out.
You have to make up. I only have 3 steps.
Okay.
I can give them out to anybody in the audience who wants to.
Okay, I can make copies of these.
Thank you.
Thank you. And is that everything, Wade?
Yes, that's all I have.
Well, thank you. Appreciate you being here. Good to see you.
Thank you. And good luck.
Thank you. Any further public comment? All right. And I mean, with that, any other comment? Go ahead, Madam Co-Chair.
Madam Co-Chair, I just want to thank all the members of this committee, especially Senator Case. When I first got in the legislature, I served 2 years on this committee, but wanted some committee chairman experience and visited with him and had the unique pleasure of getting to chair this committee for 6 years. And I just wanted to thank you for that. And then we work with so many amazing people. Certainly the friendships we develop with the tribes, it's incredible. With each other, I think this is a special committee, but our unsung heroes are always staff. I can't even tell you how difficult, like I often think if I were in your shoes, how hard my job would be. I mean, we have 1,000 thoughts in our head and we just throw them out there and somehow they organize it and they put it, pen to paper, and they just do such a great job. And, even Donna this morning with her research memo, it's 3 pages, 2 pages, but takes significant time and energy to put together to make sure that we are fully informed. So we're making good decisions. And I just want to say this has been a wonderful, wonderful experience, and something will be one of the highlights of my life is getting to be a legislator and serving with all of you. So I do have a few gifts for staff and one for my co-chair on the way out the door. These are kind of fun, but kind of a more indigenous looking buffalo, which we have on our flag and is an important animal for our state. But anyway, so I have some mugs for you. So thank you. Thank you for letting me do this work.
Thank you, Madam
Madam-
Co-Chair. Go
Madam
ahead,
Chairman?
Senator Case. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. This has been a delightful season, and it's been a delightful 6 seasons under the leadership of my colleague, Senator Ellis, and your able leadership, Representative Oakley. You're both going to be missed, but we know that you're both not far away. And it's with gratitude, and thank you for leading us. And I think I speak for everybody in the room, even though I don't have the right to speak for everybody in the room, but we give you a standing ovation.
Oh, well, thank you all. Appreciate it. Meeting adjourned.